I guess I was fairly apprehensive the whole time that I was flying in combat. And I guess there's good reason to feel that way. I'm there to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and therefore they would like to damage me. And I was 25 years old at that time. Top Gun was really a thrill. I must have done well in actual combat because at the time I was just a lieutenant junior grade, which is a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so I may have been the very first lieutenant junior grade to go through Top Gun. That was the dream of a lifetime come true. I had wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot just like my dad from the time I was 10 years old. STS-27 was my third launch. And it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. We were a top secret, classified Department of Defense mission. So to this day, if I told you what we carried, you could never leave this hangar. You'd be... Well, I will never forget. We maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing. And I looked at what I was seeing and I said to myself, we are going to die. To be an airline pilot, there was mandatory age 60 retirement. I was a NASA astronaut until I was 50 years old. And so I looked at the situation, and I had known a number of Southwest airline pilots. And they were just like me. They were flying because they loved to fly. Well, there's a lot of piloting that goes into it, a tremendous amount of piloting that goes into it, because you're going to wind up passing other airplanes. You're going to get in a duel with another airplane that's fairly closely matched. So there's a ton of satisfaction from doing that. And hey, let's just talk about the racing itself. It's fun to fly low, but it's dangerous. And so the only time I fly low is at the Reno air races. But watching the ground go by you at 400 and 500 miles an hour is pretty darn thrilling, because it's really scooting on by. And that's fun. That's really fun. I had always been fascinated by racing planes because they're sleek, streamlined, and they go real fast. There's that need for speed again, and they're raced around a pylon. And so I determined that I could break the existing altitude record for altitude and horizontal flight for that category of airplane. And in fact, I did that in 1991. And I'm fond of saying that If I have done well as an aviator, it's because my dad was the one who taught me how to fly. And he didn't just teach me how to fly, he taught me the why of it as well. He taught me the aerodynamics behind it, the reasons that you're doing things, not just how to do it, but why you're doing it is also very important.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Vaccaro, Air Force, retired, and I'm at Oshkosh standing in front of a MiG-29 with Bill Gaius, who's the director down here and runs the Warbirds flight line, and he asked me to come out and talk about some experiences I've had flying with MiG-29s, not in MiG-29s, but in the Air Force I was very fortunate, and I flew F-15Cs, and I spent the last part of my career down on the Gulf Coast of Florida in operational test and evaluation, and we had a really unique opportunity in the late 90s to fly with some former East German MiG-29s. The German Air Force kept one squadron of MiG-29s after reunification for a period of time that we used for dissimilar combat training, both in the United States and over in Europe. And Bill just asked me to talk a little bit about what it's like to fly against a MiG-29. So I've had a couple of opportunities to do what is probably the most fun thing we get to do in the fighter community, and that's what we call basic fighter maneuvers, or 1v1 maneuvering.
Your childhood answers worldwide.
And had a couple opportunities to go out in the Gulf range with the MiG-29 and dogfight. And I was flying an F-15C at the time, even with the Dash 220 engines. And the MiG-29 is a fantastic little energy machine for a fourth generation fighter.
Car ain't up and you see all that black
smoke. Which means it can turn really, really well. So it's an awful lot of fun to dogfight against.
Worldwide.
When I was a lieutenant back in the 80s, this was the primary adversary, and it's really unique to get to watch them at the air show. If you have an opportunity, when you get to watch a fourth generation airplane like this fly, and then at the same demonstration you get to see a fifth generation airplane fly, like a F-22 or an F-35. Becomes immediately apparent, even just standing on the ground, how much more energy the fifth generation fighters are able to generate. So airplanes like the F-15 and the F-16 and the MiG-29 and its partner in crime, the Su-27, are all good airplanes, but they're pretty significantly outclassed by anything that's in the fifth generation right now. However, it still presents a great opportunity for training against an adversary aircraft that you may run into in a little bit lower tech war. Certainly what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, I believe the MiG-29s are the primary fighters that the Ukrainians are flying. The airplanes are still around.
The Alpha Jet's tucked in nice and tight.
So it's just a neat airplane, and it's absolutely cool that folks like these can pull this together and bring a jet like this up to Oshkosh, so us folks can actually still experience it out in the wild.
Let's just watch and listen to Cummings.
heard the dreaded words, danger close, which meaning we're going to be employing, in essence, right in the middle of their fight.
Good hit, good hit.
First flown in 1974, the F-16 Falcon has proven itself to be an outstanding aircraft for both air-to-air combat and ground attack missions.
Our guys are getting shot up. We need those buildings dropped now.
We were trying to sort this out. It was very hectic, and our comfort level of where these bombs would go was not completely there yet.
He's clipping for me, and I'm not comfortable dropping this bomb until we find out exactly what they want in the middle of a town.
We're trying to piece this together, and the one thing I will never forget is if you don't drop those effing bombs right now, Americans are going to die.
Americans are going to die if you don't drop the bomb.
And at the time, you want to absolutely make sure. The worst thing for any fighter pilot would be to drop and to hurt or kill friendly people on the ground.
We finally got it all together and able to put down a bomb, and you could just hear the calm in his voice.
Sniper, good effect.
And it was a big sigh of relief. We landed and were met by the squadron commander. They had already called to let us know that what we did that day saved American lives.
The 100th Fighter Squadron of the Alabama Air National Guard has been one of the units recently deployed to Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. Representing the 100th Fighter Squadron at this year's Warbirds in Review is Major Ray Fowler, an F-16 flight lead who has flown 4 deployments to the Middle East, 3 to Iraq, and just this past year to Afghanistan. Ray will tell us in his own words about the F-16 and the pilots who fly in today's demanding environment.
We're here today to recognize those who are currently fighting our missions, our wars, and protecting our freedoms. So this is a really special session for us. I will hold off to even introduce the people who we have today because David Hartman is our moderator. Some of you, I see the age group out here, you probably recognize that name. We're very fortunate to have David Hartman be part of our programs here. And you see the logo here. Scott's Miracle-Gro Company is our presenting sponsor for Warbirds and Reviews. So a big thank you to Jim Hagedorn, the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company. Fagan Fighters World War II Museum has sponsored the coins that we'll be offering to all our veterans once the program is over to say thank you for your service now or your prior service. We sincerely appreciate those airplanes that we have here and the freedoms we have to be able to restore them and present them here and tell our history would not happen without all the support of people like Ron and Diane Fagan. And then there's a Jelly Belly sponsor that gives our volunteers a new appreciation for Sugar Attack. They've been dipping in the Jelly Bellies. So I would like for you to enjoy the talents of Sleeping Dog Productions, Flying on Demand TV, and we are actually streaming live right now. So we are not only reaching those of you who are fortunate enough to be here and experience all of this, we are reaching a worldwide audience, which I think is pretty cool that we have come that far. So again, thank you to the Sleeping Dogs for their talents, and they have a wonderful video that they have put together that was taken last fall, when our friend Ray Fowler was in Afghanistan. He was wishing he were here flying Mustangs or something fun like that. But looks like he was having a pretty good time flying the F-16 over there with the Alabama Air National Guard that was activated. So please enjoy the presentation, and thank you to all of you, and to you Air Force personnel, the F-22 crew who made this happen this morning. Thank you.
Thank you all afternoon. How fortunate are all of us? Yeah, I'm watching too. How fortunate are all of us to be able to be here on this beautiful day in this beautiful place surrounded by airplanes in this gorgeous plaza dedicated to Connie Boland and her late husband Ed, who created this program 13 years ago and who have been so significant in warbirds for 3 decades. And what a privilege is it for all of us to be here to honor our veterans and our men and women in uniform who continue to protect the freedoms of our country. We're all really privileged today. Thanks. So meet our panel. First, John Cummings. He's an Air Force Major. He is the CO, the commanding officer of the Air Force F-22, a Raptor aerial demonstration team. He actually graduated from high school up the street in Appleton, coincidence, and from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Earned his Air Force commission, got his wings, went to F-15s. From F-15s, he went to the F-22. He has 1,500 flight hours in the F-15 and the F-22. Welcome, John Cummings, Major Cummings. Major? I just said, I know you're stealthy, but I didn't know you're that stealthy. Hey, John. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Have a seat. Next. You just heard about Ray Fowler, but Jim Lawrence has had an unusual flying career. He first started with Gold Wings and flew as a Marine in Vietnam, A-4s and bird dogs. Then he left and went to the Navy and flew A-4s and the A-7 Corsair, then switched to the Air Force. Have you ever heard of anything like this? No, I didn't either. Went to the Air Force and flew the A-10 Warthog. He served in all 4 wars, Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, 39 years active, 7,700 hours of military flight time, and he's got 36,000 hours flying total. So Jim Lawrence. And Jim, take that next to last chair, if you would. And you just heard about Ray Fowler, but I'll fill in just a little bit about his guard operation and all those 4 deployments he's had, and recently from Afghanistan. He's also a Delta pilot with 12,000 hours, and you can find him flying every conceivable kind of warbird around the country and at air shows and museums around the country. He's Ray Fowler to us, but he's Major Fowler today. Ray? Hey, man, great. How are you? Get in the middle. And finally, Mike Wagner, he is a warbird guy here, and he moves all these airplanes around all week of every year. But his day job, he was the electrical engineer and is in charge of electrical engineering on the F-22 at Hill Air Force Base. Here's Mike Wagner. Mike? So, Jim Lawrence, I just mentioned about your flying in Vietnam. Talk a little bit about that before we come up to the really modern age here, about the risks of your A-4 flying and your bird dog flying.
Well, the technology, obviously, with this F-22 sitting here was dramatically different from what we had in Vietnam in the A-4 and especially in the bird dog. All we had at the time was basically a map, so you learned to read the map very, very well. The Marine squadrons, I was with VMA 211 based in Chulai. We were moved off of the carriers so that our reaction time for the close air support to the Marine grunts and the Army grunts would be much more. I flew the A-4 for quite a while, and then I was asked to volunteer to go fly as a bird dog FAC with VMO 6, and I was my call sign was Fingerprint 41 in the 01. And
So
it was flying the bird dog was actually more rewarding to me personally, and I was 21 years old, so I was dumber than a box of rocks. But working with the grunts on a daily basis and seeing the impact that you made on saving our Marines and saving our soldiers was pretty dramatic.
So you moved to Navy and flew what, the Corsair?
Yes, sir. I flew the A-7 Corsair, deployed on the Forrestal and the Eisenhower.
So describe, what's the difference between carrier launch and trap compared to landing out here on a runway?
Well, one thing, that runway's not moving. And the carrier can be pretty interesting. The worst deck I ever landed on was pitching 26 feet, and that can be rather sporting. Taking off out of here, you know, you push the power up and you launch, and with a catapult shot, you go from, typically in the A7 loaded, we would go from 0 to about 175 in 1.9 seconds. So it was a pretty good cat shot, and of course coming into land, you had about a 24-inch window as you came across the back of the ship. So it was fun. I loved it. I'd be doing it again today if they'd let me.
Move on to the Air Force. You, Mr. every United States Armed Force, flying the Warthog in Bosnia.
Yes, sir. You ought to see my closet. It looks like a war surplus store. But I was in the Navy, and I had been selected for commander and all this other stuff, and they came in and said, well, you guys aren't going to be flying anymore. And I had a buddy of mine that was the squadron commander of an A-10 unit, and I called Pig Dog and said, hey, you know, what do you think? And he said, man, I'd love to have you. I had a really unique experience. I got to go to Top Gun School, or Air Force Fighter Weapons School, as a naval aviator, which was kind of interesting. That's kind of a funny story. But and at the time, I had a two-star general who happened to be one of my best friends, who was the head of the Air National Guard, and I called Phil up and told him what I wanted to do, and this is a true story, as God is my witness. I was out of the Navy and in the Air Force in a day and a half.
So what was your first flights over Bosnia in the A-10?
In Bosnia, we were deployed initially during Operation Deny Flight, and we flew patrols over Bosnia, keeping the Serb forces on the ground, their Air Force and everything. We kept them down. And then in August of '95, the Serbs shelled the marketplace in Sarajevo and killed a bunch of women and children. And then NATO finally got the guts to do something about it. And we launched, I led the first strike of A-10s that morning, August 25th. And we then changed to deliberate force. And I honestly didn't think that we were going to be able to go in and hit these guys. Took off at 2 o'clock in the morning. We found our tankers, which for the A-10, we didn't have any air-to-air radar like, Ray's bird and John's bird. So finding our tankers was kind of an interesting thing in the pitch black night, but we did. And then we went into an orbit off the coast of Bosnia. And about that time, sun came up. Magic, which was the AWACS aircraft, I was Mako 27. And they called me and said, Mako 27, go green, which meant go secure radio and all that other good stuff. So I did, and they came up and said, your weapon's free. And I went, holy crap. We're really going to do this. And so I called the strike package over to the radio frequency we needed to be on, and I released them, and I said, your cleared weapons free, God be with us. And off we went.
Now, how much anti-aircraft, if any, how much ground fire? What were the risks in the way you were flying that mission and those missions?
The one particular mission, this was the first morning, our target was the largest armor repair facility in all of the Balkans. and it was in a town called Hadichi, just outside of Sarajevo. My wingman, Dan Peabody, was an attorney, so we called him Counselor. And Counselor and I rolled in, and as I rolled in on the target, Dan, who had never seen any combat experience at all, he was a guard baby his whole life, and all of a sudden he starts yelling at me, and I've rolled in and I've locked up my target that I'm supposed to shoot with a Maverick missile, and just as I'm squeezing the trigger, Dan starts yelling at me, "Nomad, Sam, break, Sam." Well, one of the things that you do if you're going to direct the guys, you tell him which way to break. But Dan was so excited at seeing a real, no kidding, surface-to-air missile coming up that he said everything but which way to break. So it was one of those instantaneous decisions. You know, I just said, okay, I'm going left, and I broke really hard left, and I looked over my shoulder and I picked up the SAM coming up. And one of the things that you want to do is to defeat it is you want to try and make the angles so great that the missile can't, the gimbal, you know, it can't hack the turn. So anyway, I was able to, and I put flares out. I wasn't getting anything to let me know that it was a radar missile. So I knew it was a heat seeker, and I started putting out flares, defeated this missile, and about that time Dan called me and he said, Nomad, 2 SAMs right, 5 o'clock, break right. And so I broke right into him, picked up those 2, defeated those 2 missiles, and then he called me and he said, Nomad, break left, SAM coming up, 8 o'clock. So I broke back left, defeated that one, and then the 5th one came up, and I'm taking it on, and all of a sudden these tennis ball-sized tracers are going by my airplane, and there's flak going off, and I thought, damn, this is really serious. And anyway, I was able to defeat that 5th one. Well, the British on Mount Igman were able to fire artillery anti-aircraft on those anti-aircraft sites, and they were able to knock out 3 of them. But the one that was away out of their range was just hammering away at me, and about that time the 6th SAM came up, and I went over it inverted and was able to defeat it. And then the gun and I were just it was like the gunfight at the OK Corral. Literally, I had tracers going by my canopy, and I said, well, you know, if I'm going down, I'm going to take somebody with me, and I flipped my gun on. There's a 30-millimeter shell. The A-10 carries 1,142 of these and fires 70 a second.
Wow.
That'll hurt you.
Right.
So anyway, I took on this sight. It was a 37-millimeter, and I started firing at about 9,000-foot slant range, started hitting him, got a secondary explosion, and then broke out of there. In the meantime, Dan had called me, Nomad, I'm hit, because Dan had rolled in to try and help me get some of the pressure off of me. And so now I'm contending with defeating these missiles and these anti-aircraft sites, and now I've got a wingman that's been hit. And I knew that his wife was going to kill me because they were expecting triplets the next month, and if anything happened to Dan, I was a dead man. So anyway, I told Dan to break out and head for feet wet, and I was able to get out of there, finally joined on him, looked at his airplane. What had happened was that we had a bad batch of ammo in his airplane, and it had internally exploded, and Dan, there was a big boom, and his airplane shook, so he thought he had been hit. But anyway, I joined on him, and we went to the tanker. I told Magic, the AWACS, that we were desperate for fuel, and the tanker guys actually were magnificent. They rolled out right in front of us about a quarter of a mile, and then we went home. So that was the first morning, first mission.
How did it go after that? How long were you continued to fly these missions?
We were over there for, and this is right after O'Grady got shot down. Right. We were activated and sent over to Aviano, Italy. We were there for another 5 months. We continued combat operations throughout September and the end of October. And then we actually escorted the Serb forces out of Bosnia.
You know, lately we're hearing or reading in the papers that the Pentagon, I guess the Pentagon wants to cancel the A-10 and get rid of the A-10 Warthog. What's your thought about that?
They're idiots.
Why?
The A-10 is an incredibly unique airplane. It does so many missions well. Sandy mission, which is escorting the rescue helicopters. C-130, but you talk to any grunt on the ground, Marine, Army, or otherwise, and the one airplane that they want to be there is the A-10. It's got the staying power, we've got the loiter time, and we certainly can carry the ordnance. We can't get there as fast as these guys can, and not that their airplanes are not capable, because they certainly are. The A-10 is just a different animal. But to get rid of the A-10 is a huge mistake, big mistake.
Ray, let's move up to F-16. How long have you been flying the F-16?
15 years now. And so I started back in 2000 flying the airplane. So I've been in as a Guard baby, started with Air National Guard, and happy to still be flying it today.
Tell us about the airplane and what it will do and what it's designed to do, what its missions are.
Well, everyone obviously knows about the F-16. Still a very popular airplane, built in the early 70s. The airframe is pretty much the same as it was when it was designed in 1974 when it first flew. However, it's been highly modified now, so we have a lot more capability in the airplane. It was really designed as a day air-to-air fighter. Really, it's now multi-role. It's day and night. And fortunately for us, they have upgraded the weaponry, the avionics, and really made it a very capable airplane for what we use it for. But obviously, it's you look at the technology and what the F-16 can do. This thing is quantum leap more in technology. So, this is the future. The F-16 I wouldn't say is the past, and in the role that we're in right now, particularly in Afghanistan and where we're flying, we really are not threatened from the double-digit SAM systems and some of the more technological surface-to-air missiles that can actually knock us out of the sky. Same with the A-10. It is an amazing airplane, and like he's saying, in our role today for close air support, both airplanes are great. It's just not survivable throughout the entire world in the theaters that we can go fight anywhere in the world. So this is the future. Again, the F-16, I think on day 3 or 4 after this guy knocks everything out that can mess with us, then we can do good work. But it is an amazing airplane still today for what it does. It's a great airplane.
What were your Iraq missions? You had 4 deployments to Iraq.
We were deployed as night 1 of the 2nd Gulf War, so I had a nice seat to watch all the cruise missiles hitting downtown Baghdad for that. But our role over there was really to support the guys on the ground, the Special Forces guys that were in there that were basically there to push out the current regime. So we've had multiple trips over there to really install the new government, and again, we've been there a decade before even that war started as a part of the Northern Southern Watch. And, again, in that part of the world, I think we're going to be there for some time.
Now, what about Afghanistan? You've just come back recently from Afghanistan. What were you doing?
Much of the same thing. So we were, that was our unit's second presidential activation. So we were sent over there for 6 months, and it's really the first time that an Air Guard unit has been sent for 6 months with no swap out. So typically with the Guard, they will take multiple units and they will allow for a swap out. They told us, congratulations, you're going for the entire 6 months with no swap outs, and it really was not any kind of voluntary activation from our end. So last year, whenever I was actually watching these great programs on the internet, I was over there stewing, wishing I was here instead of over there. But we were doing close air support, so all the coalition people on the ground. Unfortunately, you don't hear about it as much, but it's happening daily, and I guarantee it's happening over there now. With the drawdown, we still have American forces, coalition forces outside the wire, outside of these bases that are out there, and they need support. They need airplanes overhead, and that's what we were there to do. And of all my deployments, that one, bar none, was the most interesting one and the most employments that we did. So just between my flight alone, me and my wingman were over 40 combat employments. We got to shoot the gun multiple times, which is always a hoot in combat as well. And just to be a part of that, it was an amazing experience. But we had several missions to where it made the difference on guys getting back to their families, and that's pretty gratifying.
How much latitude did you have in wanting to either shoot rockets, guns, drop bombs, and to what extent did CAOC, like in Qatar and so forth, control what you were able to do and why?
Well, we say that we need to add a second seat to the F-16 so we can carry the attorney with us, so we can pass the documents back and forth to make sure that you're legal before you push that button. So, you know, it is part of being a fighter pilot is making decisions, but you have to be able to back those decisions up. But the rules are very specific over there now. I mean, obviously in that part of the world, you can't win the hearts and minds if you're hurting people that don't need to be hurt. So, very restrictive on what we could do. However, when it got into some of these life or death situations with guys on the ground where they had to have people drop bombs, fortunately for us, I mean, everything's precision now. So we did drop incredibly close to forces, which when you push that button, you're really hoping that the engineers got it right and that bomb goes where it's supposed to go, because nobody wants to find out that they hurt somebody that wasn't supposed to be when you get back. But yeah, the rules are very, very specific and very restrictive. And that's one of the reasons we would, shoot the gun, because it was sometimes it would just take too long to get through the approval process to drop, a higher class, 500-pound bomb.
John, up to your airplane. We've just heard him laud your airplane. Tell us about the Raptor. What's it designed to do? What does it do? What are your missions?
Well, the F-22's mission is air dominant. So it was originally designed to replace the F-15 back in the 1980s to be our premier air-to-air fighter. It is as a fifth-generation fighter, we talk about 4 specific things, and I'll explain all of them, but stealth, super cruise, integrated avionics, and then the superior maneuverability. So for the stealth, you can see the airplane, everything on it was designed with stealth in mind. So the idea is to be able to engage the enemy long before, and kill them long before they see you. Super cruise gives us the ability to gain and sustain supersonic speeds without afterburner. The engines are designed around it. They're optimized for fuel efficiency at Mach 1.5. It just gives us the ability to cover a lot more battle space and operate a lot farther apart from what we would traditionally employ as 2 ships in a close visual formation. The advanced integrated avionics piece is important as well. It allows us to fight far outnumbered than what other folks would, and the reason it does that is because it combines information from all the sensors on the airplane, and it builds track files, and it does so automatically. If the radar sees an airplane, it'll go out and test some other sensors to find out more about that airplane. And as the jet starts to build tracks, we look at a God's eye view of the battle space, as opposed to historically where you have a radar display over here, maybe radar warning over here, and maybe a tactical data link, and you're building those pieces, putting those all together in your own brain to build a battle space picture. And the Raptor does that for you, and that's a force multiplier for sure. And then finally, the maneuverability of the airplane. It's the only operational jet fighter that we have in the Air Force or in the U.S. Military right now with thrust vectoring engines, and it's a completely fly-by-wire flight control system with very large flight control surfaces that just give the ability to maneuver the airplane the ability to maneuver in ways that seem to defy physics.
To what extent, you say it's all fly-by-wire, have you seen or experienced anything where the fly-by-wire, the electronics, went awry and forced you to have to make decisions that you would not normally have to make if everything's working right?
There's no manual backup at all. So the stick, to pull the stick back, it takes 43 pounds. Why? I guess because the engineers thought so. And all that force just sends an electrical signal to the flight controls that says, I want to pitch up. So there's 3 different computers. They're all making decisions. They're voting on what one another thinks. But without those computers, the airplane just wouldn't be flying. So there'd be one way you'd be flying that silk parachute down to the ground if anything happened there. So as far as the way the system works, though, it's pretty spectacular. The flight control laws that the jet is designed around know about the airflow, speeds, all that goes into the computers, and they help make their decisions. So for normal level cruise, if I move the stick to the side, I get ailerons deflecting. But as I start to get higher in alpha, even maneuvering post-stall, all bets are off. So the jet might know that one rudder is completely washed out. So to save hydraulic forces, it's only going to move one. The one that it knows is actually going to see the forces in the wind stream. So it can yaw the airplane using differential movements of the stabs. It's just really impressive.
Is all that electronics as fabulous as you describe, but does it also require so much concentration that you can be thrown off broader picture challenges in any way?
The engineers did a really nice job. When we, as part of the being on the demonstration team, I actually go and get to talk to some of those folks that worked on the flight control system of the airplane, and we practice some emergency situations that could possibly get us in trouble close to the ground doing the demo. And in doing so, I've been able to talk to those folks, and sometimes we give them a hard time. The airplane has the gun is on one side, as you can all see. There's a rectangular door over the right wing root up there, and when you take off, the airplane just has this ever so slight roll to the right, and it's because the gun is over there. So that they want the airplane to have this natural feel to it that it wouldn't have if they didn't do such a good job with designing the flight control. So you'd be hard pressed to fly something with a manual flight control system and go fly this airplane and know that it's different.
Well, Mike, you started smiling when he started talking about the electrical system. How much can you tell us about the electrical system on the airplane?
Well,
yeah, really close, really close.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
The electrical system on this aircraft, when we was first starting to design it, it took a lot of the new technology, plus we was also pushing the envelope at the time of what the technology was out there. And to get all the different systems and the different companies that was developing these systems to talk together under the same language was one of the biggest challenges that we had. To be able to integrate it and set up the electronics so that way the pilot didn't have to worry about it. A lot of the ideas here was to take a lot of the work that the pilot has to do to maintain the airplane, take that away from him and let the electronics handle that part so that way he can concentrate on his mission. And that was the whole idea about the Raptor, was to make it much easier for the pilot to do what he has to do to be able to accomplish his mission.
So how satisfied are you, and you, John, that you've accomplished that with this airplane?
I'm very pleased with it. I'm very happy because since I worked on it, yeah, I'm happy. We were tied in with a lot of electronics, the structures, and the LO and everything about the aircraft and what we was doing. And there were so many different groups within Lockheed and the other businesses that was working with us to try, and just as soon as we set up one side of the electronics and it was working fine, then when we go to integrate something else, then we'd have to try and it's a lot of give and take, just like in designing the aircraft. You've got your aerodynamic people that says, no, you can't put that there because it's going to interfere with the aircraft. And then you got your LO people that says, no, because that's going to cause other kinds of problems. So it was a lot of give and take until we actually came up with the configuration we have now. But we're very pleased with the aircraft.
John, you mentioned the gun on the right side. What are the weapons? Are there other weapons besides the gun?
Yeah, absolutely. Being the air-to-air fighter that it is, it was designed to carry 6 AMRAAMs, which is the AIM-120. It's our medium-range radar-guided air-to-air missile. So it can carry 6 of those as well as 2 AIM-9s, and that would be an all air-to-air configuration. You can give 2 of those AMRAAMs away and carry a 1,000-pound bomb or a rack of 4 small-diameter bombs, the GBU-39. So it can carry up to 8 of those if we so choose, or 2 1,000-pound bombs, but in the all air-to-air loadout, it's 8 missiles in the gun.
So it is a genuine fighter bomber, right?
Well, we have we would call it an air-to-air fighter with a ground attack capability. So we, unlike airplanes that do close air support that can actually look at ground-moving targets or get talk-ons, anything like that, I don't have the ability to look and see with a targeting pod what I'm actually dropping on the ground. I only drop coordinate-seeking GPS-guided weapons.
Have you, Ray, have you ever dog-fought, or whatever the term is, with a F-22?
Yes, we have. In fact, last month we went out to Nellis, and we were dedicated support for the weapons school for the guys that were going through the weapons school at Nellis in the F-22. So it's fun to go do that, just to see this airplane and what it can do. It's also fun to hear the guys when they talk about how they shot a Raptor and all that, but we all know that if that happened, it's basically, it's 20-to-1 type thing, and this airplane is amazing. So when you start talking about the LO, low observation, we just don't see it on the radar, and that's a good thing. I'm glad we own them. And that's the whole intent, that when we go to war against someone else, they won't see it either, and they'll come through and just basically mow down all the people that don't need to be flying. But it is amazing to dogfight, to see, and we cannot. Several of the missions that we go out and go fly with the airplane. Again, I can't tell you how amazing it is to watch the airplane in the air and to see what the capability is over the F-16.
Ray, did you have other tape? Did you bring other tape from your Afghanistan missions, or was that all shown earlier?
Well, whatever the Air Force had, we provided to them, and that's pretty much what we had for that.
Right. Mike, back to you. When you think about this technology, when did you start designing or being part of the design team with electrical systems on airplanes?
About 15 years ago is when I got involved with the Raptor, and I actually got involved with the structures first, and then got tied in as we started developing, started modifying and doing more stuff to the Raptor. I'm actually doing more in structures and other parts of the aircraft than I am electrical anymore. Right. But at the time that I got involved, again, we was trying to get everything working together and talking in the same language, also to get it set up to where we can give more information to the pilot, so that way he understands what's going on.
Jim, we started with the bird dog, and now we're talking about the Raptor and what it's capable of doing. I mean, this is almost a history in the last 40 years of military aviation, from one extreme to another.
Right. The aircraft that I flew, the F-8 Crusader and the A-4 Skyhawk and A-7 Corsair and, of course, the Bird Dog, I mean, we couldn't even spell GPS. So, I mean, it was non-existent. So the technology that Ray sees and the technology that John sees is just fantastic.
So what were you flying in Afghanistan? Because you weren't on active duty, were you?
No, sir. I volunteered. I was asked to volunteer to go fly with the basically Department of Defense, 101st Airborne is who I was attached to. And I volunteered to go fly MC-12s, which are King Air 350s, had all the super secret stuff in the back that we used, and worked directly with our ground troops over there. So it was a very rewarding.
John, you talked about, well, he just talked about secret stuff in the back of the airplane. How much secret stuff is there on the Raptor that you can't talk about?
That's one of the popular airshow questions. Tell me a secret that you can't tell anybody else.
Right.
But the Raptor, it's interesting. You see, there's a few gentlemen running around here with machine guns, but we started stealth technology with the F-117. Even the SR-71 had some low observable features to it. We moved on to the B-2, which was the computer-aided stealth generation, where you could start to get smooth surfaces. And now we have the Raptor and the F-35. And of course, those are built on all the lessons that we've learned. That, of course, the secrets that we don't want to get out. So, we're worried about the airplane because it's a valuable asset just to have in general. But so much of what we've learned that technology wins wars, and so that's what we always try to protect. Which is why I will say yes.
Yeah. Next question. F-35 you just mentioned. To what extent does the F-35 build on this technology, or to what extent will the F-35 have a different mission?
That's another popular question. So the F-35 is really designed to complement the F-15. The intention.
F-15.
I'm sorry, the F-22.
Okay.
So where I mentioned that this is primarily an air-to-air fighter that has an air-to-ground capability, you can reverse that for the F-35. So it's designed to be a joint fighter. It's designed to meet a lot of a multi-role fighter, a lot of different mission sets in one airplane. I'm not going to tell you if that was a good idea or not, but we tried to win. I think the war of numbers, meaning the more of something you make, the cheaper it gets. So that I think was the intention. Who's to say where we are today? But I will say, knowing a little bit about the airplane, that the Raptor had growing pains that the F-35 is going through now. There's certainly way more eyes on the F-35 based on the size of the program and the media that we have today surrounding it. But if it one day does what it's designed to do, then it's going to be a heck of an airplane as well.
Well, Jim, you started.
One thing that is amazing with the technology that John and Ray see, the airplanes that I flew we had to get behind them. We had to dogfight them and get behind them. They were all rear aspect. And now these guys have the BVR capability, which is fantastic.
Which means?
Beyond visual range, I mean, they can get a lock and the guy, they don't even have to see him, and don't have to positive ID, visual ID, and they can knock him out of the sky, which is just absolutely wonderful. Right. But the one thing is, you know, the bad guys have got some pretty good stuff too.
So, Mike, did you start to speak?
Yeah, one of the things that the Raptor was designed for is that, you know, the F-16 and the fighter pilots and everything were trained there was to fight and attack. The Raptor is more of finding its target, getting within range, locking on, firing, and then getting out of there instead of actually attacking. You're trying to stay away from the one-on-one more than you're trying to go in, and it's not always just visual because you can do it with the GPS.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, anybody got a question for these guys? A hand raised? Yes, sir. Stand and yell, please.
If it's not proprietary, how many F-22s are there, and is F-22 production over now, and it's done airplane?
We built 195 of them, and so the some of the more recent ones that are off the assembly line we have here, it is no longer in production. 2012, I think, is when the last one was rolled off the assembly line, and we have tail 192, so third or fourth from the last is on display in Boeing Plaza, and we'll be flying that one this afternoon.
So, questions? Yes, sir, down here in the front.
Yes, sir, right here. Stand, please.
In addition to our own military, we have some very close allies, particularly in the Middle East. I wondered what sorts of assets the Israelis have and how likely they are to be able to get into Iranian airspace when and if they need to, given the fact that what we hear is that those people over there are getting the latest Russian stuff.
Good question. Anybody want it?
I'm still wearing the green suit, so I guess I'll answer that question. So the so we like to study, and it's very easy to fight wars where there's red and blue, as we call it. So blue being good and red being bad, and then everything in between is gray. So you know, the F-30. Well, Israel is going to get the F-35, and what the other as to other threat nations, the things that they have. Those are things that you know, that we have folks that in the intelligence community that follow all that, and it's just not to talk to those kind of things here would in the specific details. It's just not what we'd get into.
I got one here, Dave.
Gentlemen, you haven't talked about JDAM, Joint Direct Attack Munitions with the ring laser gyro. Well, I'm one of the guys that brought the ring laser gyro out of the tool and die stage and brought it into production, and you know what amazing weapon that is.
Yes, and I will tell you it is an amazing weapon. So if you were part of that, boy, I love it. You know, we joke and we say it's 06 bombing, meaning you can let any colonel go fly the airplane, he can hit his target. So it is amazing. I dropped over 20 of them with the trip that we were just on. So again, like he's saying, if we can find the target, we can generate coordinates and we can hit that target and kill it. And the JDAM is an amazing, absolutely amazing piece of technology. You basically just type in a coordinate. You can type in an impact angle. You can type in an azimuth where you want it to go. If it's a revetted structure, you can actually have that weapon go into that structure in any angle. But a lot of things that with weapons that we've dropped in the past, like the laser-guided bombs, you know, we had to drop those on a specific axis, and we wanted them to come off within a basket. And there were all kinds of different things that could foil those. Just a single cloud getting in the weapon, you could lose your target, a moving target. So we do have the laser JDAMs as well. So we actually drop laser JDAMs over there. And again, when I went over for the first trip to Iraq, we could actually put in 8 digits into that. So we figured out the math. It was really could be about a 6 foot. So we're talking 6 foot difference in that. And when you do your tape review, you would actually see that bomb hit somewhere within that 6 foot range. You know, now we have a 10 digit. We put it in there. So again, if you could generate the coordinates to that circle right there for the Scott's logo, and And from 35,000 feet, you could drop a bomb and run away bravely. And that's one thing we do pretty well that the A-10 can't do, is run away bravely. And it will hit right in the middle of this, spot here, and it just does not miss. And again, of all the ones we dropped over in Afghanistan, we didn't have a single malfunction at all. They all found their targets, which is amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for what you've done.
Right here, Dave. He asked the only problem they had with the Raptor was in the oxygen system. Can you report on that?
Sure thing. So, one of the things that we've learned designing this airplane is we used to, historically, the military played a very large part in designing components and subcomponents by a mil spec and handing the blueprint to a company and say, build this. And one thing that we did with the Raptor was, to no fault of anybody, it's just we made those requirements a lot more liberal. So we learned a lot of lessons with the troubleshooting the oxygen system on the F-22 and how requirements are generated, especially when you have systems that integrate with other suppliers. So, it's a Lockheed airplane, but Boeing owns a lot of the subsystems, who then contracts to Honeywell, who makes the OBOGs, who other companies make components that go in it. So it's made all over the country and probably in all 50 states to make it a good deal for Congress. So there's just some subtle differences in how we designed the life support system on this airplane. We didn't really fix anything. We just understood how some of the restrictions that were put on different components and how the air was being delivered to the pilots. And we also learned stuff about how our life support equipment and the survival gear that we wear was affecting all of that. So like I said, we increased our understanding significantly. We realized, I think, in the Air Force that one of our core competencies used to be aerospace. And 30, 40 years ago, you wanted to know something about flying at high altitudes or going into space, you went to see the United States Air Force. And I think we've farmed a lot of those things out to that knowledge base out to either academic institutions or suppliers. So,
Mike, did you want to add anything to that, Mike? No? Okay, that's fine.
I think he explained it very well.
Good. Yes, sir.
Major, could you talk about the mission reliability and capability rates of the F-22? We've heard they're not as useful because of that.
I don't know the exact numbers, but what I will tell you is an honest answer is, so I used to fly the F-15C before this, and I remember we'd go out in the morning, and the planned mission would be 12 airplanes going out to fly, either all together or separate different missions. And if you, in an aging fleet, if you were to get 8 or even 9 of those jets out and airborne, that was a pretty good day. And I will knock on wood on this chair, but I can't tell you that many times where I've gone out thinking I was going to fly the Raptor and I went back inside. So it does very, very well. It does exceptionally well. I would have to ask one of my experts in black in the mechanics on that, but I couldn't tell you. It's actually an exceptionally maintainable airplane. The one thing about the airplane that's different from everything else, though, is the LO, as previously alluded to. So the entire airplane is covered in radar absorbent material, and if you want to get at certain components, sometimes it involves a hammer and a chisel to chip that stuff away, take the panel off, fix what you need to fix, put it back on, and then it goes into a LO restore and a cure for that. And so a lot of the panels that you can see on the airplane, particularly in the nose of the airplane, are easy access panels. So we lose a little bit. We've given a little bit away in the stealthiness of the airplane for maintainability. So it's always a compromise.
Yeah, that's one thing that we constantly work on, is because since the whole aircraft is covered in LO material, it takes quite a bit to be able to break into the aircraft to get to a very simple fix that normally it takes just a screwdriver and take a panel off. Well, we break into the seams, so that way when we take the panel off, then when we put it back on, then we have to go back and, like he's saying, restore the coatings to the previous stealth level that it has. And that's usually where we have a lot of our labor and maintenance is tied in with the coatings that's on the aircraft.
Sir.
Major Fowler and Mr. Lawrence, thank you for your service. Could you two speak of your current day flying warbirds as compared to the active duty aircraft that you flew at the appropriate times? That's part one. And part two, could y'all also speak to the wearing of mustaches in a combat area?
Yes. Robert Dixon, ladies and gentlemen. They own the Swamp Fox. And yes, to speak to the modern airplanes versus the warbirds, before I ever went in the military, I was kind of a military wannabe, so I was very fortunate to get to fly a lot of neat airplanes. I was flying the P-51 before I actually went into pilot training for the Air Force as a lieutenant. And again, you look at the P-51 out there, which is probably one of the most beautiful airplanes I think I've still ever seen. It's just got the great lines. It's a great airplane. So to look at their mission and what they did for us and for our freedoms versus the modern day airplanes, it's night and day. So at least back in those days, it was really more of the air crew. I mean, they made the decisions. Their airplanes did not keep them out of trouble. Our airplanes, for the most part, keep us out of trouble and don't let us do really dumb things. He alluded to the fly-by-wire, the F-16, same fly-by-wire. So you're really a voting member. You tell the airplane what you want to do, and the airplane can say, you really don't want to do that. So it'll take it away from you. So really, we could solo you in an F-16 probably in a third of the time, if not, a lot quicker than we could in any kind of World War II airplane. So obviously the controls are really a lot different in that regard, but the F-16 is much easier to fly. But again, the mission is not the flying. So the airmanship is basically secondary to the mission, and that's accomplishing what we're there to do, and then shoot down airplanes, drop bombs on bad people. So I'll let Jim give you his response.
Well, the airplanes I flew, they were all fly-by-wire also, and the cables were about that big around. And so that was pretty much the fly-by-wire, that I had. I'm currently flying a T-6. Ray is one of my heroes. He gets to fly all the World War II airplanes that I salivate over. And thanks to Connie and Melissa and Ray, I got my first ride in a P-51, which was just fantastic. But I agree with Ray. The warbirds of yesteryear that the world's greatest generation provided, and what those guys flew compared to what we've flown, and especially these guys have flown, well, the difference is night and day. But it still hasn't taken the pilot. This UAV thing is, in my opinion, is starting to get out of hand, because in a combat situation, you need a pilot sitting in there, not some guy sitting sipping coffee, not to take anything away from the UAV guys, but you need a pilot sitting in the seat that can make the decision on the scene at the moment. So anyway, that's it.
I might add to part of the question you asked of Ray about mustaches. At 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, Christina Oles will be here. Her late dad, of course, Robin Oles, who had the most famous mustache in Vietnam. So come visit us on Saturday morning and hear a lot about Ray Oles, Robin Oles, from his daughter, who completed writing his memoirs. Sir.
Just a question. As an F-22 pilot, is there an aircraft or a weapon system that you fear or are most concerned about today?
On the adversary side, it would be the surface to air defenses that are being proliferated around the world. So I mean, some of these things have some pretty significant capability even against us. So another thing though that actually concerns us is, especially in the AOR today, is fratricide. So it's being shot by friendly forces that are also airborne coalition forces that perhaps don't know where we are, and that's one of the unique challenges that we deal with in a stealth airplane, particularly when we don't share information over a data link with certain coalition partners. So it can happen, and it's definitely something that we're worried about.
Sir.
Thank you. The F-16 was built in vast numbers. You mentioned that the the Raptor, there's only 193 built. I'm very curious as to if you know the factors that led to that few being built.
Well, I can't speak to all the factors, but what I can say is this airplane does so much more than what we can do. So again, a single Raptor can do, what a flight of 4 can do or a flight of 8 can do. It's just, like you said, it's a force multiplier in the capability of the aircraft. Now, obviously, the aircraft can't be at all places at all times, and so there are some limitations, but fortunately, we have some incredibly smart people that look at those numbers. You look at stealth, you look at the technology, there's some great books out there you read about where it's gone, and quite frankly, one of the reasons that everybody's not running around with stealth airplanes today is because they can't afford it. So fortunately, our government can't afford it, for now anyway, but it is a numbers game, and you look at the numbers that they can build, and they could probably build twice as many airplanes for a very similar unit cost of the airplanes when you start looking at some of the data, but it's really we do have smart people that are looking for the next, decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ahead of what the threats we'll face and the airplanes that we'll have. And again, we'll have enough legacy airplanes, and we say legacy, which is the 4th generation, which is kind of sad that an F-16 is now kind of a legacy airplane. And again, they're shooting down F-16s, by the way, now. They're drones, so now you start seeing the orange painted F-16s. That's what we go down and shoot at for missile shoots. So it kind of just shows you that even that airplane is pretty much dated at this point. But once you get to day 3, day 4, day 5 of the war, once these SAM systems that are so capable have been taken out by the aircraft and the other systems that we have available to take those out, then we can bring in the other fighters and things like the A-10, and again, it's like he's saying, if there's guys on the ground and there's an A-10 overhead, those guys know that they're protected, but they won't be there anywhere near the front of the war until these guys do their work.
Sir.
How fast can this bird fly compared to the F-16 and F-35, and what's your range on just internal tankage?
So this is a Mach 2 airplane, and before, like I mentioned, I flew the F-15C, which I believe in the day it was advertised to do 2.5, and I think if you were going to do that, that was pretty much all the gas that you had in the airplane. We have the ability, because of the slick design, all the missiles being carried internally, when the jet is clean, with its really big motors, it can get up and go. So we routinely operate at supersonic speeds, 1.2, 1.5, and without a huge hit on fuel. And as far as overall range, we flew from Langley Air Force Base here 700 miles, and we had gas to do a few patterns. If we really wanted to stretch it out, we can do about 1,000 miles. And of course, air-to-air refueling is a force multiplier for everybody. So airplanes are, especially fighter airplanes, are designed with some compromises. The more gas you hold, the less maneuverable you are based on the weight. So it seems like pretty much around the world now with jet fighters, you can fly them for about 2 hours before you need to go back to the tanker, with the exception of maybe the A-10 that has a little bit longer duration based on the engines that it has on it. So,
Sir.
I'll take the F-22 demo guy for 200. I was just wondering, twofold question. Can you take us on kind of a virtual walk around of the plane and explain just a couple of gee whiz type things? And then number 2, maybe describe a little bit of what we'll see later on in the demo as far as things to look for and maybe how different aspects of the airplane are applied to that.
Sure. So nose to tail, from you're on the good side with a gun. The jet has a radar up in the nose, along with a lot of other sensors. As you look at the airplane, you can see that it's very clean. There's not a lot sticking out of it. Antennas, everything like that, it's all embedded in the airplane. And there's a variety of different sensors all around it. You can see all the shapes. If you were looking at the airplane, you think about what makes a stealth airplane stealthy. Well, there's the size of it. Obviously, if we were to have a tennis ball, that would obviously have a smaller radar signature than a basketball. Then you've got the coatings on the airplane, the radar absorbent material that's all over it. So the size, the shape, and the coatings. And if you were to take a tennis ball, like I alluded to, throw it at the airplane, there's very few places that you could go and do that, and you could actually get that tennis ball back. So getting down, obviously you can see the side weapons bay doors are open there. You can see where that would be our air-to-air missiles are going only in there. Underneath in the main weapons bay, you can carry in missiles or bombs. And then as you get back to the wings, like I mentioned before, very large, efficient flight controls, leading edge flaps on the wings, as well as trailing edge ailerons, flaperons. that all move together depending on what the flight controls want to do. The giant tails on the back that give the airplane the stability on the vertical tails as well as the horizontal tails, those are all moving. In fact, our vertical tails are larger than the wings on the F-16, for example, but it is a big airplane, so it needs those as well. And then finally, on the way back, you can see the thrust vectoring nozzles on the back because the engines are shut down. They're in their full open position, so 24 degrees up or down. And despite that large range of movement, I very rarely, even in some of the really high alpha maneuvering, do you see them move more than 5 or 10 degrees because the airplane is unstable. The CG is fairly far aft, and so the flight controls keep it flying. And with that, instability gives it its superior maneuverability. So it's always the computers that are flying it to keep it from departing controlled flight.
And the demo tomorrow, how much of this will we see in your demo tomorrow?
Yeah, we're actually flying this evening, and around 5:30, I think, or 5:38 is our specific takeoff time. Unfortunately, because of Oshkosh's of small aerobatic airspace, we can't do the full demonstration. So there's a couple high alpha maneuvers that can't be accomplished in because we don't have a Category 1 aerobatic box. But what we will do is what looks normally like our flat show or our low show. We'll be able to show you a little bit more of the vertical on either end of the aerobatic box, and then ultimately at the end of that performance, then we'll do a heritage flight. So we have a P-51 and a P-38, and we'll do a series of passes to showcase air power past and present. And that's my favorite part of the show. You get to fly. These guys fly warbirds, but I get to fly alongside of them, so that's pretty cool.
Cool. Dan?
Question was answered. Someone asked me when was it going to fly, so that was it.
That
You want me
was
to
good.
take some more questions?
No, I think we're good. One last question for me. What's your call sign, John?
I go by Taboo.
You want to share anything about that?
Yeah, if I could share it with this audience, then it wouldn't be taboo. So how about that?
Okay. Ray, what's your call sign?
Mine is Hollywood.
Whoa. Want to share about how you got that?
Absolutely not.
That's what I thought. What about you?
I will say that your naming is one of the worst days of your entire life, and that's for me, same way. It's not something I want to talk about.
Jim, how many call signs did you have? Did you have to get a new one every new squadron?
No, sir. It kind of stayed with me. It actually occurred when I started Navy flight training, and a bunch of student naval aviators were all sitting around, and one of the guys looks at me and said, "Well, Jim, what's your last name?" And I said, "Lawrence." And one of the guys said, "Oh, like Lawrence of Arabia." And I said, "Yeah, he's supposed to be in my family tree somewhere." And one of the guys said, "Well, you're just a nomad." And there it was.
We got it. John, Ray, Jim, Mike, thank you, gentlemen, very much.